Yak? Yak. Yak! Who is Yak? What is Yak? Before you ask, yes, he is the main antagonist of One Piece. He is the one Luffy seeks to defeat, the one that all the Straw Hats seek to defeat. Yak is the final opponent that they must all face, and truly, he is the source of all evil. No, but seriously, Yak is a movie. Let's check it out. Originally, I only thought this movie was called The Giant King, and that's because everywhere here in America it's only referred to as The Giant King. And as it turns out, the American version is the second English version. I tried my best to find the original English version, but I think it's actually impossible to find the first English version of this movie because no matter how hard I tried, there was nowhere I could find the original English version of this movie. It's only the American version. The voice actors for the two main characters are Bella Thorne and Russell Peters, and they're not the only celebrities that are used in the American version. Now, what exactly is The Giant King all about? Now, the plot of the movie is that the big green one, named Zork, is a war robot, but he doesn't want to be a war robot. He wants to be a kindergarten teacher. But the creator of all robots, named Ram, wants all robots to only follow their programming. And because Zork wants to follow his dreams, he's considered broken and has to be destroyed. So Ram is a satellite, and in order to keep Zork in place, in order to be destroyed by his ultimate weapon, Ram sends Pinky to keep Zork in place. And Pinky uses this special chain that's almost indestructible to keep Zork in place long enough for Ram to charge up its weapon and destroy Zork. Now, this is in the intro of the movie, but just before the intro, you see this weird sequence of images that look like Indian art. And the reason that is because the story of the Giant King is loosely based on Ramayana, which is a Hindu epic. More specifically, this is the Thai version of Ramayana called Ramakien or Ramakeen. I don't know the specific pronunciation. And even more specifically, it focuses on the Monkey King, but that's in the original English version. The American version, which I'm looking at right now, is edited to be its own thing. It's not entirely based on Ramakeen or Ramayana or the Monkey King. Before I get too far ahead of myself, I just want to briefly talk about the creator or the creators of this movie. And the main person attributed as the creator is named Prapas Cholsaranon. I'm pretty sure I might have butchered the pronunciation of his name. And I found out who he is from the only website associated with the Giant King. And from the brief blurb he gave, he just made this movie for fun and to talk about friendship and duty and to bring joy and entertainment to people, which is nice. The only other thing I know he's worked on is called Feed. I don't really know what this thing is about, but I'm short on time to check it out, so whatever. And honestly, it's the only one I really want to talk about. There's just no way I can figure out how to pronounce these guys' names. What I do think is cool is that on this website they included a list of the voice actors and actresses. I don't know, I just think it's nice to have the face of the actor with the character they're voice acting. I'm also surprised they included the voice actor for the scrap seller at the beginning of the movie. It's just a nice little thing they did. So yeah, check out the website, maybe check out the creators a bit. You can also download I think 6 or 8 posters they have on the website. So let's check out the movie now. And like I said before, I basically gave away the intro just now, but what I didn't say is that Zork and Pinky were leading opposing armies. So when Pinky captured Zork and tried to keep him in place, Ram's weapon just destroyed everything, including both sides of the armies.
So I told Ram my plan to turn off my BattleBot mode forever, and here we are.
I also like to say there was a funny joke right here in the intro, and it's this.
When the villainous Zork had gathered thousands of rebel robots for battle, he yelled, "Charge!" And his soldiers all plugged into nearby outlets, charged their batteries, and 4 hours later, they attacked.
I don't know, that was kind of funny. I liked it. And then we immediately get an intro to the movie, and we see the scrap seller who I mentioned earlier, and he's just digging for scrap, and he finds Zork, and he gets super excited because he's gonna be rich selling off Zork as scrap. So when he takes him to town, he's just got a ton of buyers for all of Zork's parts. But he doesn't really care about Pinky, and he says if you can separate him from Zork, you can keep him for free. And in everyone's attempts to separate them, this one robot with like the 1,000,000-volt battery just zaps everyone while trying to break the chain. And that jumpstarts Zork and Pinky. And Zork kind of wipes the floor with everyone before calming down. And then everyone remembers what they were doing, and they immediately start trying to destroy Zork and Pinky, and they just take off. There's a brief chase that winds them up at a dead end, and Pinky tells Zork to jump over the wall. So he like runs back to get some space and then runs forward, but forgets to jump and just rams through the wall. So on the other side of the wall, there's just a cliff. And they both fall down to the bottom, and there's a brief musical scene. I forgot to mention that. It's like sort of a musical as well, with only like 3 songs, so don't really worry about it. But Zork gets stuck in oil up to his neck, and these little evil robots start jumping out of his head, telling him that he's gonna be destroyed by Ram. But then he wakes up, and Pinky says that he's under arrest, and he's under arrest. This means that... Let me go back a bit. Let's look at the box art. Let's look at the back of the box art and look at the description. Right, let's look at this description real quick. 1,000 years after an epic robot battle, sworn enemies Zork and Pinky wake up with no memory of who they are or how they wound up chained together. In search of answers, they begin wandering the barren wasteland, looking for Ram, the creator of all robots, and making new friends, as well as a few enemies, along the way. But when their memory is restored, will their newfound friendship prove to be stronger than an unbreakable chain? So from this, on the back of the box, we're told that they shouldn't know who they are or why they're chained together, and yet right now, immediately in the movie, at the very start, they tell us that they know who they are and why they're chained together. So why aren't they fighting? My mind is fried. I don't know how to explain myself clearly, but the box tells us they don't know who they are, but in the movie they do know who they are, and Pinky's trying to separate them, even though being chained together is to his advantage, or her advantage. I don't know, this mentally broke me the more I think about it. So, moving on, they're just wandering the wasteland. They come up to a fork in the road. Zork has a good idea of going right because there's a little smoke, suggesting a city or something. So Pinky takes them left because there's a huge column of smoke. And when they get to their destination, it's like a factory that's on fire. But instead of helping out, they just focus more on trying to find a way to separate themselves. And they find these spinning gear things. And they try using those to break the chains. But instead they get their chain stuck on a hook above the wheels. And while trying to get the chain off, Zork ends up feeding Pinky into the gears and having to use a pipe to stop the gears, which in turn stops everything in the factory and stops the fires, and they immediately become heroes. Oh, I also forgot to mention that while they were wandering around in the wasteland, Ram woke up and is charging his weapon. But yeah, after they get declared heroes by the mayor, we get a montage of them trying to break the chain and accidentally doing heroic actions. Like in this section, they try to break the chain with the chisel, only to end up hitting a purse snatcher in the head with the hammer. I don't know what they were thinking in this section. They're like trying to saw the chain off with a lamppost, but that doesn't make sense. It's more like they're using the chain to cut the lamppost instead of the lamppost to cut the chain. But anyway, this causes a chain reaction of lampposts falling over, saving this robot cat and sending it to its owner. In this one, they're more like the villains, because they're trying to use a train to cut the chain, but the chain is too strong, the train can't cut it, and it ends up derailing the train, and Zork has to prop up the train in order to keep everyone safe. Pinky just stands there taking credit along with it, but really it's their fault. They almost hurt a lot of people. Their final attempt is using this huge stack of explosives. And when the explosion happens, they discover oil. And we see Pinky didn't exactly succeed in finding shelter from the explosion. But yeah, they become even greater heroes for finding oil. And while everyone is happy and celebrating their discovery, they're just dejected and walking through town, sad that they couldn't cut the chain. I think their last hope was this guy who gives them a backstory on their story. I'm not entirely sure what the point of this scene is, but yeah, they just move on and we meet Crumb, a toy seller, and we get our second song between him and Rusty. Rusty is this little robot girl who's sick and sneezes, and her boogers are acidic, so it causes rust, and nobody likes her because of it. Now, Crumb is just using Pinky to show off his toys, and he does a pretty good job sharing around her, but because she causes rust, naturally she sneezes on the robot, causing rust on their face, and that grosses everyone out and they run away. Naturally, Crumb is upset about this and just kicks Rusty out or just forces them away. And Crumb just thinks and talks to himself about wanting to defeat Zork and being known as the strongest battle bot. Moving on, we cut to a blue robot kid and a yellow robot kid fighting over a remote controlled robot toy, and they end up breaking it over their fight. Rusty comes up and offers to fix it for them so she could play with them, but they both decide to just go away because they're afraid of getting Rusty like her, and they even call her names while they're heading off. Rusty tries to play with the toy herself, but it's alive and it runs away from her as well, so she just sadly plays on the swing set until she sneezes on it and it freezes solid from rust. And while she's sitting down sad on a giant tire, Zork and Pinky come up and Zork says that he'd like to play with her. Rusty doesn't really want to play with them because she's worried they'll catch rust off of her, but Zork doesn't really care. Pinky's just going off about following programming until Rusty sneezes on her and Pinky says what's wrong with that kid, and that just upsets Rusty more until Zork just says that they should just be friends and they all go along with it, even Pinky. Next we cut to a bar and we meet Brooks, a mountain climber, and he talks about following your dream, and his dream is to climb up to the sun. Pinky naturally doesn't understand the concept of dreaming and why Brooks would want to climb up to the sun even though it's very hard and he could possibly die doing it, but he just wants to. And Brooke just leaves Pinky with some words to think about. After this, we cut to the two kids from before and Rusty near this giant magnet thing, which is apparently used to magnetize things. Go figure. And the snotty little blue robot suggests a contest of bravery to see who is brave enough to get close to the magnet even though it's dangerous. The yellow one doesn't really want to do it, so he hangs back, and naturally as Rusty and the blue one fight and get closer and closer, the blue one crosses the safety line and he gets sucked in along with Rusty, and the yellow one runs away to get help. They use one of those robot car things from the beginning of the movie, and it has this suction cup crane that it tries to reach out to get the kids, but the magnet's too strong and sucks it in. And seeing that it might crush the kids, Zork runs in and uses his body to block the robot crane and push the kids to safety. Pinky goes and gets the key, and the crane uses its suction crane to get Pinky as close as possible to the other robots that are standing by. Pinky can't get all the way to the robots, so they link arms and try to reach out to Pinky, but one of them slips and they all end up getting sucked onto the magnet. While trying to reach the control box, Pinky manages to pull out the chain connecting her and Zork. It wraps around the control box and she uses it to climb towards the control box and turn off the magnet. The next day we cut to Crumb. He's putting up newspapers onto his truck and he sees an article featuring Zork and he's like, oh yes. And he goes and looks at his stash of weapons and he's like, no more toys for me, I'm gonna be a battle bot. We cut to Pinky and Zork just in the city. Pinky's jealous of Zork because he's getting more attention than her, so she goes off on her own and she finds that there's a monument being built for the two of them, and the monument had a chain on it, but the workers separated the chain because they don't have it connecting them anymore. And while she's trying to put the chain back on, she gets struck by lightning. The workers from before come in and check up on her to see if she's okay, but they also get struck by green lightning and end up getting possessed by Ram. And they go on to a musical sequence about destroying Zork. And Pinky is finally like, alright, fine. I guess I'll take Zork to be destroyed, which she should have been doing from the start, since she already has her memories. So she just sort of tricks Zork into following her out into the desert. Crud is there. He shoots one of those little suction cup darts at them, but just goes out like a few inches, and he's like, don't worry, I'll be back. Also, he's targeting Pinky in the hopes that hurting her will get Zork mad enough to fight him. And he shows Rusty his lunchtime grenade. And he mentions how he wants to fight Zork and attack Pinky. And since Rusty is friends with them, she's like, hold on, what are you doing? But Crit's just like, hey, don't worry about it. I'm not going to hurt them. Also, this doesn't concern kids. Just stay here. And now he introduces us to Flapper. And Flapper is a wind-up bird that Crud winds up to travel, I guess. But as he's trying to wind up Flapper to head out, Flapper's like, what do you mean? You think we're just going down the street? Wind me up more, son. Pinky and Zork are out in the desert, and Zork starts talking about dreams, saying he's pretty sure Pinky has her own dreams, which Pinky pushes back against a bit. While Zork's asleep, she thinks that Ram is wrong for wanting to destroy him. We have a brief scene with Crud for comedic sake, and then we cut again to Pinky and Zork in the desert with Pinky stuck. And while Zork is trying to help her against her wishes, Crud just catches them in an electric net and sets up a target behind Pinky. And just as he shoots her with his lunchtime grenade, he misses. And we get a quick montage of him trying to shoot Pinky. And we see he has thought bubbles of every time he missed Rusty. And at this point I realized Crud was legitimately trying to shoot Rusty and hit her. So no sympathy for Crud ever. Also, it turns out Rusty was hiding inside of Flapper, and when she stands in between Crud and Zork and Pinky, Crud aims at Rusty because he knows he's gonna miss, and he hits Pinky, and it turns out his lunchtime grenade is an actual weapon that works, and it activates a rocket that sends Pinky flying away.
Rusty, I miss you and I hit her!
Pinky!
Oh, Pinky!
Despite trying to provoke Zork into fighting, Zork just picks up Crud and smashes him into the ground, so only his feet are sticking out. When he learns that the grenade is gonna explode at noon, Zork decides to climb up to the sun and stop it, and Rusty points him in the right direction, and Zork takes Flapper to the tower. Flapper takes him as high as he can go, and Zork almost falls to his death, but he manages to survive and starts climbing using some metal he ripped off the tower. And it's just constantly cutting from here between Zork climbing and Rusty and Flapper trying to save Pinky. Eventually they realize that Rusty can just sneeze on the grenade to get Rusty and pull it off. And while Zork is climbing the tower, he finds Brooke's grappling hooks. While reaching out for the grappling hook, his hand crosses a laser tripwire which activates the tower's defenses. The first set of defenses is just a bunch of giant balls being dropped down, which he sort of easily avoids and passes over. The next trap is a bunch of rotating blades, which is actually much harder for him to deal with. Eventually it gets so hot that the grappling hooks don't work efficiently anymore. They're sort of like suction cups and the heat warps them. So Zork uses one of them to rip off a blade and wedges that onto the top of the section he's on and just sort of swings up to try and get to the top. But he can't reach. It's a little too far for him. And as he's falling to his doom again, an arm pops out of his back and grabs onto the ledge and pulls him up to safety. The top of the tower has a railway on it and Zork follows it to the sun and he gets in its way to stop it, and the sun is constantly telling him to get out of the way. Zork stops the sun, but then there's a huge rumbling and an even bigger sun appears behind it, and to my shock, it actually runs over and kills the first sun. And since Zork has to stop this sun before noon, he does everything he can to keep it from moving forward. But his body starts burning up and he starts shorting out. And in the process, these heads in his head activate and release his arms, which he uses to completely immobilize the sun for a bit until he finally explodes. And as Zork crashes to the ground, Crud picks up the noontime grenade and is like, oh man, they broke it. But then the sun hits noon, the clock on the grenade hits noon, Kurt gets happy, and then the bomb explodes on it.
It's working, it's working, it's working! Hang on, we're about to get some turbulence in here.
And I assume it kills him as well, since we never see him again. After the explosion, we see Zork in the center of a crater, and Pinky uses her chain to wind up Flapper and send off Rusty. From here, Pinky puts the chain back into Zork's shoulder and drags him. And we get an inner monologue and some pop music again. And it's just Pinky saying to herself that she doesn't think Zork is all that bad. She stops at this thing that scans her and lowers the ground into a giant arena, and she just starts talking to Ram and saying she doesn't think it's bad for robots to have dreams. Zork wakes up and he's like, you know what, it's fine, just let Ram destroy me. But Pinky wants to save him, and somehow Ram takes control of Zork and he starts fighting Pinky. It's a pretty intense fight, and two parts I like in this fight are Zork using his hands to make him act like a Beyblade.
What? What are you doing?
And another part of the fight that I like is Pinky using her chain to just rip a chunk out of the arena and drop it on Zork.
Time to pay!
For some reason, Ram possessing Zork has a Russian accent. Just a thing to note, I guess. From here, Zork pins Pinky to a wall and threatens her with her blade thing. And Pinky gives this speech on Zork and friendship and whatever. And Zork manages to fight off Ram and throw Pinky out of the arena. From here, we learn that he can shoot out the sun symbol on his chest. And he tries to use it to destroy the little heads in his head. But they separate and run around and try to get back onto him while Ram is shooting down its weapon to kill him. Eventually, Zork manages to cut the little heads in half, and for whatever reason, Ram's weapon does not kill him. Instead, it bounces back up into the sky and just explodes. And we see Ram saying mission accomplished, and it's Russian accented voice saying that it's fine for robots that have individual dreams. Zork just collapses and Pinky cries for him, and from here we cut off to a kindergarten, and Pinky is talking to the kids about having dreams, and you find out that Zork is alive, he's fine. Flapper comes and takes the kids on a field trip or whatever, and Rusty comes by calling Zork and Pinky mom and dad, which is weird, and they give Zork a Christmas hat, and Rusty reveals she turned the little heads into an RC car, and the little heads just seem kind of wonky, and they just end the movie like that. So yeah, that's the end of The Giant King, but it's not the end of this video. No, I wasn't happy just watching the American version. I put a lot of energy into researching this. I tried my hardest to find the original English version, and I got close. I was going to buy the Blu-ray of this movie, and that Blu-ray would have been from Thailand, the motherland of Yak the Giant King. But it was out of stock, and they refunded my money, which is cool. I might check out this website later. It's called eThai CD. I thought it was sketchy, but they gave me a refund because it was out of stock, so they're cool. I'm going to check out their catalog of animated stuff and see what catches my eye. So since I can't get my hands on the Blu-ray, I did the next best thing King and I got the DVD, but the DVD is the Japanese version, and I took a huge gamble buying the Japanese version, but lo and behold, it had the original English version, and that makes me very happy. And I checked it out and I liked it better than the American version. So again, to reiterate, the Thai version is a retelling of Ramayana, and there are things in this version of the movie that aren't in the American version of the movie, but the odd thing is, the original version has more content in it and is shorter than the American version, which is longer and feels like it has less content in it. It's super weird to me. I don't know why that is. I think it might have something to do with the credits or whatever, but yeah. Another thing to note is that the Thai version, the original version, is about duty and friendship, and the American version is more about following your dreams, and I guess a little bit about friendship. In the original version, Zork is named Tosakan, but when he loses his memories, he's called Big Green. Big Green. No. 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 Big Green. No. Oh no. This can't be happening. Oh my god. Am I cursed to be followed by Hero 108? Oh no. I think I'm having an existential crisis. I wasn't expecting Big Green to pop up in this movie of all things. And on top of that, there were the trailers for other movies on the DVD. And sure enough, one of those movies was for the submarine that I saw in Splash Entertainment. I don't know what to say. You could say it's just a coincidence. I say it's destiny. But going back to the Giant King, Pinky is called Hanuman, but is named Whitey after losing her memories. But instead of being a girl in the Thai version, Pinky is a guy, which also explains all the abuse Pinky went through in the American version, even though she's a girl. American cartoons don't usually put women into physically abusing situations. Rusty is the same. Rusty is a girl. Rusty is called Rusty. Rusty is only ever their friend. Crumb is called Coom, and Flapper is called Sadatu. In the American version, Flapper is a guy, but in the original version, Flapper is a woman, and she was originally Tosakan's chariot, or whatever. And the premise of the original version is that Tosakan is trying to destroy Ram, which is why Ram and Hanuman are working together to destroy Tosakan. This small difference already changes the entire concept of the movie and the motivations of the characters. I guess I'll just be talking about differences between the two versions. At the bottom of the cliff where the American version completely ruined the concept of the movie, the Thai version actually stuck to it. Like in the American version, Zork doesn't even mention the weird dream he had. But in the original version, Tosakan was talking about having a scary dream. And Hanuman was like, what are you talking about? You're a giant. What do you have to be afraid of? And they're just trying to figure out anything they can about each other. They decide Tosakan is now Big Green. And Pinky, they sort of go for Ram. Because it turns out Ram is stamped on Pinky's back. Or Hanuman's back. And Hanuman is just like, that sounds so familiar, but it's so basic. Might as well stick with Pinky. Another thing I noticed about these movies is American animated films are usually scared of having quiet moments. And the American version, Pinky was having like an inner diary. And here it's just Hanuman and Whitey and Big Green just wandering in the desert in silence until they come across the fork in the road and go left. The one thing I'm very happy about is the fact that they still have the hero song. The hero song survived the cut, probably because it was such a long sequence and necessary, but I'm so glad it stayed. We also get an extended scene with the red guy with the chainsaw trying to cut their chain, and it goes into the story that a million days ago Tosakan was trying to destroy Ram and rule the world alone. We also learned that in this version, Chrome isn't selling toys, he's selling weapons, which I think is strange. It actually makes more sense to me that he's selling toys instead of weapons. Because in the American version, it makes sense that he wants to hide that he has a ton of weapons. But in this version, it doesn't make as much sense that he's hiding he has a bunch of weapons. He also shows that he wants to be part of Tosakan's army. He doesn't want to kill Tosakan. And this version, Krillin initially thinks that Zork is just a big robot that's good for bringing into the army. The sequence where the robots get possessed by Ram also makes more sense because it makes Whitey remember that he is Hanuman, and also makes the scene with Crud outside make more sense because he learns that with Whitey being Hanuman, it means Big Green is actually Tosakan, and this also changes his interaction with them. He's actually trying to protect Big Green from Hanuman, and he seems a little more likable, but he still tried to intentionally shoot Rusty, so still no sympathy for him. Flapper, who is now Sadatu, also has completely different dialogue. We learn, I think I already said that she used to be Tosakan's chariot or whatever, and she gets super excited when she sees Tosakan again. It also makes more sense why she would help out Tosakan go as high up the tower as possible, and why she would go and try and rescue Rusty. Also, Sadatu realizes that Whitey is Hanuman after looking at his chain for a few seconds, which is pretty cool. I don't know, it just means Tosakan has competent allies.
What you mean send her back? I'm not your local post office. Hanuman.
And while there isn't an inner monologue with Whitey hauling Tosakan to get destroyed by Ram, there is a pretty epic song about destroying Tosakan. Hanuman actually has a conversation with Ram, who's using the walls to speak with Hanuman, and Hanuman is trying to make the case that Tosakan is actually good and that there's no need to fight him, but Tosakan is at peace with being destroyed because he knows he's a monster. And while Whitey is trying to get Tosakan out of there, the little heads in his head activate, and Whitey realizes it's Tosakan that's in control. I just want to say that the fight scene here is much more enjoyable to me because in the American version, they're just constantly talking and Pinky is constantly pleading for Zork to snap out of it and become himself again. But in this one, there isn't that much talking. Like in the section where Tosakan is crushing Hanuman's head, in the American version, there's just constant talking and pleading even though Hanuman isn't moving his mouth. But in this one it's just grunts of pain and you're just allowed to absorb what's happening instead of just hearing noise. And if you haven't figured it out, Big Green is not Tosakan. Tosakan is the little heads in his head. They collectively are Tosakan. And Big Green knows this and he says that they can only be destroyed with the chakram of Tosakan, which is the sun crest on his chest. And because they destroyed Tosakan with the chakram, Ram has nothing to destroy with its blast. And that's the reason why the weapon doesn't work and it just bounces back up into the sky and detonates safely. So yeah, just a few minor notes to add on. I found this brief section of an article where they mentioned that in America they tried to pass it off as a sequel to Robots when that's not the case at all. And that kind of pisses me off because it's like the people that were trying to publish it here in the States were intentionally falsely advertising this movie and not letting it stand on its own. There's also this other article I found that speaks highly of the animation, which is pretty good. They also explain how it's unusual that they would release it with an English dub on top of subtitles. And the author of this article was hopeful that this would lead to Thai animation becoming more popular around the globe and also helping Thais wanting to improve their English. And those are very nice sentiments. I agree with that. And it upsets me that us Americans got a kind of lesser version. I don't want to diss on the people that worked on this. They worked hard. They did what they had to, but executives decided to throw in jokes and pop culture references. It's like it's the curse of animation here in the States. Everyone always sees it as things for kids when there's true potential for this medium. Instead of focusing on the movie, they focus on how the movie is made. Like anything that's not live action is for kids. Anything animated is for kids. That's how everyone sees it. I don't know. I'll put some links to these articles in the description below. So yeah, this was The Giant King and Yak the Giant King. It's gonna be very hard for people in the States to find the original version instead of just the English version, but I'm sure if you use a VPN you'll be able to find it easier than I did, because I wasn't really interested in using a VPN. I hope you enjoyed. I really hope to get more eyes on this. I'm a little sad I didn't get the Blu-ray, but I am happy I managed to see the original version. This was a fun movie, and I might have been harsh on the American version, but it's basically fine. I much rather recommend the original version. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you can find the original version for yourself. And on that note, I also want to add that it's because I was on a computer that I was able to watch the original version. If you were using a regular DVD player, you would have to change the region code in order to watch it, and you can only do that like 4 times before it hard locks onto the final region code. And then you're just screwed. You're gonna have to buy a new DVD player. So yeah, PC Master Race, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. See you later.